Okay.
Is there anything that you wanted to ask before we start the interview? Anything that you wanted to make sure that we touched on?
Nope, nothing in particular.
Okay, awesome. So let's just get started then. Is
Okay.
that cool with you?
Yep.
Okay. So what drew you to basketball?
So I think originally I kind of used basketball as an escape to kind of get away from some of the things that I was going through personally in my life. And so basketball was one of those sports you could just, play by yourself. You could just get the ball, go to the court and shoot around. And I would do that for hours. And so I wouldn't really say I was passionate about the game starting off. But the more I played and the more I competed, and even through the relationships that I built through basketball, I really started seeing it as something that I could do long term and something that I grew passionate about, but also something that I could do to provide for my family. And so that was really kind of where it started for me. And then just playing more and more, that passion and that drive just grew over time.
Yeah. And then what was the process of getting to college like through basketball?
It was tough. I mean, I was fortunate to go to a highly prestigious Catholic school in Washington, D.C. called Gonzaga. And so we competed on a very high level basketball wise. And I played against guys such as Quinn Cook, who played with the Lakers, won championship with the Lakers and Warriors, Victor Oladipo, Jeremy Grant, who's playing with the Pistons. And so every other night we were playing against Division I type talent in high school. And so I gained a lot of exposure through that, even though I wasn't the most talented basketball player on my team. I wasn't the most athletic, but I was a glue guy, and I played hard every night and did what it took to win. And I think coaches took notice of that. And so playing that high level of competitive basketball, getting that exposure, I started to get scholarship offers around my junior year. I didn't enjoy the recruiting process at all. I didn't, want to go through it, but it was a blessing just to be able to, I have an opportunity to get a scholarship to go to college for free. And so I ultimately decided to commit to Robert Morris University at the beginning of my senior year. And I mainly did that because I knew I would have an opportunity to play. Right away as a freshman. And that was something that was important to me, but also I fell in love with the coaching staff and thought, this would be the best, opportunity to grow as a basketball player, but also off of the court as well. But ended up committing right after graduation it was just a whole different story within itself. But overall, the recruiting process was a lot. And I think a lot of athletes kind of find it to be stressful, navigating that. Really, if your parents don't understand how that landscape is, you're doing it a lot on your own. And that was kind of the situation for me when I was going through it.
Were your coaches in high school helping with that process? I mean, did they give you any insight on like, these are this is kind of the roadmap of how to get into college playing basketball, or were you really just on your own trying to figure it all out?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I was totally by myself in the process. I definitely had coaches who looked out and kind of, gave me some guidance and direction throughout the whole process. But at the end of the day, coaches have a job, which is to win games during the season, and they're focused on the players who are coming up, in the years after we leave. So you as a senior in high school, you're not really the priority, so to speak. And so I think coaches have to kind of find that balance for themselves and really think about taking care of the players who are still there, but also looking towards the future and what they can do to help their program grow. And I think that's the challenging part of being a coach in some aspects.
So let's talk about coaches. You get to Robert Morris and the coaches leave. What do you do at this point? Because you're like so excited to get to college, and now the entire coaching staff that recruited you is like, gotta go, bye.
Yeah, it was a rude awakening and kind of opened my eyes to the business side of college basketball. This was before I even got to college. So it was, maybe 2 weeks before I graduated high school, I got the call from the coaches. I remember it vividly because I was actually at a workout, and I came out of the workout, looked at my phone, and I had two missed calls from Coach Mike Rice, who coached at Robert Morris University at the time. And he left me a message and basically said like, "Hey, Malcolm, like, got some bad news. You know, where the whole coaching staff basically got an opportunity to go over to Rutgers. Not sure where that kind of leaves you in your recruiting process, but, you know, give me a call back, you know, when you have a chance, basically. And I remember at that moment, I was just kind of stuck because, like I said, they were a big reason why I wanted to go there. The program looked like it was, you know, on its way to becoming very successful given the recruiting class they had and some of the players that they were bringing back. And I didn't know how it would affect me. And so after sitting down with my mom and having the new coach who, you know, took the job come down and actually try to affirm my commitment to Robert Morris. I remember having dinner with him. I talked to my mom afterwards and ultimately felt like I needed to reopen my recruitment. And, you know, I had graduated, and a week after graduation, I didn't have a school to go to. And so I'm looking at several different options, prep school being one of them. But out of the blue, Niagara University gives me a call, and I never knew anything about Niagara. I knew there had been two players who went to my high school who had played there before, but I had never really known where the school was or anything about the school or the coaching staff or things of that nature. Took a visit up there one weekend in June, right after graduation, and really just fell in love and thought it would be a great opportunity for me. So that's kind of how I ended up at Niagara. And, you know, it was a great experience, you know, playing there and for 3 years and really, you know, learning how to be a student athlete.
Yeah, absolutely. So you get your degree from Niagara, and then the NBA draft comes and you decide to go overseas. What was that process like? I mean, you didn't know Japanese. You didn't really know what you were walking into. I read that it was your first time out of the country.
Right.
What was that experience like? I mean, even going to Niagara, like, you're still relatively close to home. This is across the ocean now.
Right. And to kind of backtrack a little bit, I actually ended up transferring my senior year of college and went out to a school called Cal State San Marcos, and kind of just took a leap of faith and felt like I needed a fresh start. And I actually went out there and had the best year I ever had playing basketball. I went a level down, so it was NAIA basketball. It wasn't Division I, but we played against a couple Division I teams, and we were a lot of the players on that team had been at Division I schools, and for one reason or another just didn't work out. And we were about rejects, bounce backs, if, if you want to call us that. And you know, a bunch of guys who had something to prove. And so I think overall, having that chip on our shoulders, we had an incredible season. Individually, I was an All-American Defensive Player of the Year in the conference. And so that was really what afforded me the opportunity to go play overseas because, you know, I don't think based off of where I was at Niagara, I don't know if I would have had that same opportunity just given some of the ups and downs and challenges that I faced throughout college. And so Cal State San Marcos was really just a blessing in disguise. But having that opportunity, you know, coming from a small school and having an opportunity to go play overseas, you know, not a lot of athletes get that. And so the opportunity to go to Japan came right before I graduated. I had a coach who came to see me play one practice and really thought, you know, he was going over to Japan to coach and thought it'd be a great opportunity for me to come over there with him. And it was the first, you know, deal that I got to go play overseas. And so I was like, it's on the table. Why pass it up? You know, if it's a given. So that's kind of how the whole Japanese situation worked. But getting over there was a completely different, you know, animal. My first couple of weeks out there, I didn't have a bed, didn't have AC, didn't have Wi-Fi, was hardly getting paid any money, had to walk to practice. So it was a complete disaster from the get-go, mainly because the general manager had gotten sick. And so he was in the hospital. And once that happened, like everything was kind of in disarray. But I tell everybody all the time, like, even though that experience wasn't what I expected it to be, and I ended up coming home early, it taught me how to survive more than anything else. Like not really having, you know, any guidance of being in a different country, not knowing the culture, not knowing the language, but having to figure out everything on your own. I mean, personally, I feel like you can put me anywhere on this planet and I'm going to be all right because of that experience.
So you hear a lot about NBA players, but you don't really hear about the international players. So is Is there anything that you want to change about the way that we handle professional basketball outside of this country?
That's a really good question. I think for me personally, I mean, I think now they have like a union body, um, but I think there needs to be more transparency around what it takes to really play overseas and some of the things that athletes don't think about when getting over there. You know, aside from the language barrier and the cultural differences, things such as like how do you get Wi-Fi? How do you get cable? How do you like just little stuff that you kind of overlook being from here and then going to a different country to live for 9 months out of the year? I think just little stuff that players might not understand or struggle with throughout their first couple of years. Some of that I think could be, mitigated with maybe like a union or a body like that kind of has some support or resources when it comes to making that transition overseas. Because like for me personally, as you said, it was my first time being over there. So everything I had to figure out on my own. Whereas guys who've been over there for like 5+ years, they start to get the hang of it, but could have saved themselves a lot of time and headache if they known some of the things starting off. So I would like to see some type of organization or group of people who are kind of supporting athletes who are going overseas, making that transition, when they're out there alone.
Do you think that that should come from college athletic departments where they should just have some kind of almost like a crash course about how to play other places than the US? I mean, I had an episode of this podcast a couple weeks ago where I was talking to a woman who played soccer over in Italy, and she was Italian, so she could speak Italian, but she was over there at 14 playing for the national team, and she was in a dorm with like 24-year-olds who were also playing, and she was with basketball players and other soccer players, but they weren't her age, and no one was really telling her how to culturally assimilate.
Right.
And so she was really trying to figure out herself. Was that what you were going through?
Yeah. No, I mean, I definitely understand that, and I don't know if it necessarily has to come from the college side. I think it's tough with collegiate athletics because, going back to the coaching comparison, like their focus is on the players that are there right now, and they're trying to do their best to support the student athletes that are there. So once you graduate and you're done with the program and you're moving on, it's really kind of hard for the student athlete for the administration to provide that support and those resources to players who have already moved on or graduated. So I think it's a tough dynamic. I mean, in most cases, like these players have their agents, which can do a lot of that work as well. But if you don't have, if you don't sign with a big agency or have an agent who can give you that attention, it's really hard. So, I went through 3 or 4 agents during my professional basketball career. And when I was overseas, I maybe talked to most of them once or twice. And so they're not really giving you that support or guidance. So it's hard to say where it can really come from. But ideally, I think it would be perfect if there was like a group of former players or former player who kind of started that and understands the ropes. And I also think every sport is different. Basketball, I think, might be a little bit different going overseas than soccer. So there's a ton of different, factors that kind of play, and it's very hard to kind of figure out who's going to provide that support. How do you do it? And what resources might be required for any particular sport.
Yeah, absolutely. So did you have teammates that were trying to teach you Japanese and help you along with this process?
Yeah, I had fantastic teammates when I was over there. My first year, it was me, 2 other Americans, a guy from Brazil, and the rest were Japanese, and they were all young too. I think they were younger than us. And so, I mean, we obviously had that in common, and there was some synergy there. And, we would try to teach them English, and they would teach us Japanese, and they would try to immerse us in the culture a little bit. And the same thing my second year, I think it was me, 2 other Americans, and the rest of the team were like young Japanese players. I think we had the youngest team in the league. They were all rookies. So these were basically kids who were playing at the professional level. But, it was fun being over there with them and trying to teach them some of, my culture and them doing the same from there. And so,
Can you pronounce the team that you are playing for? I wrote it down, but I would like to not mess it up.
so the first year or second year?
Uh,
Second year was Tokyo Sink
okay.
Reeves, and the first year I played for Ashia Gaiken.
Okay. And what was the first year?
Ashia Gaiken.
Okay, and then the second year,
Tokyo
Tokyo.
Sink Reeves.
Okay. All right, and then let's go back a step and talk about your collegiate experience. So
Mm-hmm.
we were talking a little bit in our pre-interview about internships and how athletes don't really get summer internships because they're training all summer.
Right.
And so they come out with degrees but not really any practical experience, and it's a difficult kind of tightrope to work through. Can you talk about what athletic departments can do better in order to get those students opportunities?
Yeah, I think it's very tough for a lot of sports. I mainly can only speak from the basketball perspective, but I mean, we're playing year round. I remember maybe going home one summer throughout my 4 years in college, and it was even only like a month and a half maybe, and then we're back right on campus, workouts, classes, things of that nature. So playing year round, having to be a student and balance that, it's very tough for us to even figure out like how to even, write a resume, let alone get an internship. And those things are really not taught or emphasized. So I think one of the things that I think, schools or universities could be doing better when it comes to preparing their student athletes for life after sports is really just having the conversations. I mean, I can't name one, university where one of my former teammates played where that was talked about. Every athlete that I've ever talked about or talked to, when referring to the transition or life after sports, they always say like my school never talked, like nobody on the coaching staff talked about it. Nobody in administration really emphasized career development, professional development, how to get an internship, or even what that process looks like. So I think just starting that conversation for every student athlete and getting them to understand that it's not so much about life after sports, but this having dual careers. So being an athlete, but also, while you're doing that, figuring out what your other passions are, what your other interests are, and how can you integrate that into being an athlete, because you can do both at the same time. No one is playing their sport 24/7. You may not be able to put a ton of effort into your other passions or your other career or the other career that you want to pursue, but start thinking about it. Start putting somewhat of a strategy or plan into place so that when you are making that transition, it's not as difficult. So I think just having that conversation and getting athletes to understand that being an athlete is not going to be forever. It's a short window of your life, but what are you going to do? What proactive steps are you going to take to prepare yourself for that transition? And even just providing some more support from a career development perspective and bringing some of the resources onto campus to maybe talk to the athletes about what that transition could look like for them.
So do you think that athletes being paid is helping or hurting that conversation?
I don't think it's either or. I think when it comes to NIL and student athletes being able to monetize their name, image, and likeness, to me, that's much more of a civil rights issue than anything else. As I look at collegiate athletics, and we live in a capitalistic society. Every other person in this country is able to make money off of their name, except for the student athlete, from my knowledge. So when you have student athletes who are put on posters on campus, who are on television, who the schools are making millions and millions of dollars off of, who the coaches are making millions of dollars off, but the student athletes are doing most of the work, that dynamic it's not right. And so I think whether it's preparing for life after sports or, just giving these student athletes an opportunity to make a couple dollars to, if they want to go out, they have a free weekend to go out and just have a good time, or to send some money back home, they should be allowed to do that. And so, it's not about these athletes making 6 and 7 figures, in endorsements or brand partnership deals. Like, this is much more to me about, one, giving them skills that they could utilize during their athletic careers that are going to prepare them for their future business skills. So utilizing their platform, their brands to create opportunities. I think that's a skill that's going to help them going forward. But also, maybe it's just putting a couple dollars in their pockets. So, like I said, so they can have a good time. Or, my roommate in college had a kid. He's not able to support his son because he's a student athlete. But if he played during this era where we're now about to step into the NIL landscape, maybe those couple of dollars could help, his son eat. And so I look at it from that dynamic. Like, this is much more about just humanity and giving student athletes an opportunity to do what every other person in this country is able to do.
Wow. And then I actually found this anecdote. There was a Baylor women's soccer player who was a YouTube vlogger, and she was vlogging like just kind of day in the life kind of content. And Baylor University actually came to her and said, you have to stop this, because she had started making money from her channel. And they said, we can't have this. You can't do this. You can't make money this way. And so she was like, I don't know what to do. Like, it's just casual content that I'm making with my teammates, and like our strength training days, or like eating in the cafeteria. It doesn't reflect badly on the school. It actually reflects pretty well on the school, because I'm showing what they offer. And so Baylor came to her and was like, you can't do this. And so she had to take all of her content down.
Right. And
so
there's
that
so
was
many stories
a revenue
like that.
stream that she no longer had, because the school was mandating that she take it all down.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And like, that's a perfect example of, is the school overreaching? And if in a couple years, are people going to have free reign of what they're doing and how they're making money? And is the school going to have oversight on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of unanswered questions when it comes to what name, image, and likeness is going to look like. But in any event, I think we're all doing the right things by moving towards a world where it should be allowed. Like, this is basic, like, capitalism 101. Like, you should be allowed to profit off of your name. And so, as I said, being a student athlete shouldn't deter you from being able to do that. And I think the NCAA is pushing back on that. Obviously, they want to keep it amateurism. But this is a fight that's been going on for years, and I think we're almost on the other side of it in a positive way.
I also think that when you bring up amateurism, we also have to talk about sports like gymnastics, where you peak and you are in the Olympics potentially, and then you go to college. Mm-hmm. So you've represented your country, and then you represent your school. It's not the other way around. Mm-hmm. So you go from the peak of professionalism to amateurism, and it's almost backward in sports like that peak really early.
Right. No,
so that's jarring as well, I would assume.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
So let's also talk about brand management, because the second that we allow these athletes to profit off of their name and likeness, we also have to deal with the negativities that come with becoming your own brand and working against messing up. Mm-hmm. So is that something that you have dealt with, and how can student athletes who are going through that now set themselves up for success dealing with their own brand?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is that these athletes' brands are being built right now, whether they're profiting off of them or not. Like, almost every athlete is on social media. They're putting out content. People know who they are. And so everything that they're posting or that they're saying or that every person that they're interacting, that's either detracting or adding to their brand. Now it's about giving them the resources, the knowledge, the tools so that they understand what's right from wrong. And so I think that that's going to be a hurdle, obviously. And then you have to factor in financial literacy. I think mental health is also going to be a major component in this. Taxes. I mean, these are things athletes are going to have to understand. But these are things everyone has to understand when they step into the real world. So I think going back to preparing them and giving them skills that are going to be useful for life, it's going to be beneficial in that regard if universities can implement these programs and give that support. And so I think that, athletes in today's world also understand what branding is. They have a better grasp. They're more aware. They're very conscious of their digital footprint. And so I'm optimistic that even though there may be some mistakes made, these are still kids at the end of the day. I'm very optimistic that we're doing the right thing here. It's just about what steps are we taking from a university perspective, and even the people that are going to be integrated within that, managers, advisors, agents, so having some type of vetting system or ensuring that these student athletes are making the right decisions as it pertains to their careers on and off the playing field, I think is going to be very important. But there's obviously going to be mistakes made. This is a brand new landscape for everyone. We don't know what it's going to look like. There's going to be holes, but it's all about how do we take what's in place and just build on it from there, and always putting the athlete as the priority at the end of the day. And I think as long as we do that, it could be very positive for all the parties involved.
So we're quickly gaining on a generation that has lived with cell phones constantly. What can these teenagers do to set themselves on the right path off the bat? Is there anything that, as they're growing up and trying to form the brand that they want to have on social media, is there anything that they should be looking out for or trying to fine tune?
I think every athlete needs to understand what makes them different from other athletes. We live in a very noisy world. There is content coming at all angles, information at all angles. We're multitasking more than ever before, trying to at least. And so I think every athlete needs to be very self-aware about where they're going with their brand, what they're trying to accomplish long-term, and the steps that they need to take, reverse engineer where you're trying to go, and really understand the steps that you need to take in order to get there. And be self-aware, be very self-aware and clear on what your objectives are when it comes to your brand and your profile. Because, if you're doing it to make money, if you want, the big 6-figure deals, you're going to have a brand strategy put in place. You're going to have to understand why a brand or a company would want to partner with you as opposed to another athlete who might play the same position as you, be in the same conference as you, look the same as you. Why would you get that opportunity over them? And these are the questions that athletes are going to have to ask themselves, and really be clear on, in order to, as I said before, get to wherever they're trying to go, no matter what that is. So those are just some of the basics that I think all athletes are going to have to understand as name, image, and likeness becomes more of a real thing.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree. So let's also talk about the books that you've written and how they can help athletes figure out what kind of brand impact they want to have.
Yeah, so my first book actually happened by mistake. I was overseas my second year, and up until that point, as I said before, my professional basketball career had been very unstable and nothing like I imagined. And so coming back home, going back overseas, coming back home, having to work jobs that I hated to support myself because I wasn't making millions of dollars overseas. I still had to live. And so going through that process and then having the opportunity to go back overseas, in the middle of the season where we weren't playing any games, I had a lot of time on my hands, still didn't have Wi-Fi at the time. So I had a computer in front of me And having all this time, I mean, my mind was just all over the place because I'm thinking to myself, like, if basketball is taken out of the picture again, if this is my last year playing, what am I going to be doing with my life? Because I didn't have a game plan. I never really thought about life after sports or, you know, what I wanted to be doing. And so, I mean, I really just started journaling. I started to just type as a means of like therapy and reflection and trying to figure my life out. And to make a long story short, I was sharing some of that with other people. And some people, you know, felt like I had an inspiring story. I had been through a lot of ups and downs in order to become a professional athlete. And you know, people suggested that I write a book. And I never had aspirations to become an author. Never thought writing would be something that would open up any doors for me. But I really thought about my story and how can I use my story as inspiration to another athlete who might go through the similar things? Because I wish I would have had some guidance in some of those situations that I went through. So that was really how my first book, Lessons from the Game, happened. And you know, I published that book when I came back home, and it really opened up a lot of opportunities as far as media, just more exposure, and kind of falling into the landscape of athlete development, helping athletes transition. And so that's really, you know, that was the beginning of my transition, how I started to figure out my life after sports. But, you know, I subsequently published my second book, Impact Beyond the Game, which was kind of like a follow-up, but it was more focused on athlete branding and marketing. So a lot of what we just talked about, teaching athletes how to build, leverage, and monetize their personal brands. And that really came because I started to notice conversations around, you know, athletes' brands and technology evolving and athletes being able to attract opportunities because of their platforms. And I wanted to create a blueprint that showed athletes some of the things they needed to know and understand when trying to do so. And how do you furthermore carry that brand that you have, that platform that you have as an athlete, into life after sports and create a legacy with it. So I published that book last year in 2020, and I think the timing couldn't be any better with name, image, and likeness. And it's really just to help athletes understand this whole landscape, understand the world that we're living in today, and how to make the most out of that opportunity, because it's a very short period of your life. But if you can strike while the iron's hot, you know, you could create something that lasts in perpetuity. And so that's what I really want athletes to understand with Impact Beyond the Game.
So let's also talk about the transition from playing in Japan to almost playing in Morocco, and what that period of your life taught you about your relationship with basketball.
So going into that third season, I had just published my book in July, my first book in July of 2017. And kind of had a foot in basketball, kind of had a foot out of it. Didn't really know if I wanted to keep playing. And so I went to an exposure camp right before I published my book. Didn't really hear much back from any of the scouts or the coaches that I was talking to. So I think November or December rolled around, and started to do other things, and was kind of getting into the business world. And I got an opportunity to go play in Morocco, and kind of came out of nowhere. But I wanted to do it. And so worked with the agent for a couple of weeks, got the deal set up, was, you know, ready to go, bags packed and everything. 2 days or 3 days before Christmas, I got a call or email from the team basically saying, we don't want you. We want a big man. And, you know, we voided the contract, canceled the flight, everything. And I remember being in the house, reading that email and just being like, I'm done. It was in my heart more than anything just told me, like, I've had an amazing time playing basketball. Like, I've made great relationships. It's taken me all over the world, obviously. Sport has been great to me, but in my heart, I just felt like it was the right time to move on, to do other things, to pursue a greater purpose in the world. And so at that moment, I just decided to walk away. So December of 2017, I officially called it quits and hung up the jersey.
So, what would you say to athletes who are feeling that way now? I mean, knowing what you know after now that you're firmly planted in your post sport life, what would you say to athletes who are kind of on the cusp of leaving their sport for whatever reason and trying to figure out what the next move is?
Well, I'll tell you the way that I really knew I was done. Because even if you say you're done, like part of you is always going to be that athlete. No matter how much you try to pull away from it, it always is like, especially if you don't retire by injury, or if it's not out of your control. Like I could still very much play basketball. Like I'm healthy and everything. And so I made a conscious decision to walk away. And I think for athletes who do that, there's still a part of you that's like, I still want to get out there. But the way that I knew I was done was that I took a week off. I didn't do anything. I didn't lift. I didn't train. I didn't pick up a basketball. And I was completely content with it. And I told myself, if I could go a week without doing anything and feel fine and feel okay and not miss the game, then it's ready for me. It's time for me to move on, because you can't be a professional at anything taking a week off. That means you're not passionate about it. So if you're not willing to put the energy, the time, the effort into the craft, into the process, you need to be doing something else. So I tell all athletes, like, if you can go at minimum like 3 days, not doing anything, it's time for you to figure it out, figure out what your next step is going to be, or at least start putting a plan into place. Because you're not going to be able to compete if you're not putting in the work. And so that's how it worked for me. And I think that advice is applicable to any sport. But then I think it's also important for athletes to understand that even though that may be the case, and you feel like it's time to walk away, that process is still going to be challenging, because you've been an athlete, your identity has been tied to your sport for so long. Disassociating yourself from that is going to take a lot of time and patience with yourself, patient with the process, and really just understanding that it's not going to happen overnight, that whatever career you step into the next, or whatever passion you have, you're starting back from ground zero, and it's just going to take you putting in that time, that effort, that work that you put into your sport, into this next thing, and just being as patient as possible.
Yeah, I think that was so interesting that when you hit the week mark, you were like, I don't feel like this is as big a part of me as it used to be. I mean, what was that realization like? Because that had been your life for so long, and suddenly you were like, this is not how I remember it feeling.
It was weird. Because I played basketball for almost every day of my life. And so you kind of taken out of this routine. I mean, there was periods where I definitely took a week off, a week or two after the season, like in college. Like after the season is done, I'm obviously not getting back into the gym right away. Like you're taking some time off. But I always had that itch to be like, man, I can't wait to work out again. Or I can't wait till like we start preseason or we get back on the court. I didn't feel any of that. And I think if you don't feel that, then that passion is dried up. Like for me, it may have been like I felt burnt out, or I was just tired of the process of trying to sign with an agent and figure out how to get a contract overseas and navigating the business side of it. That could have been part of it. It was definitely a different feeling. But I mean, it's with anything in life. Like I'll keep going back to like the passion having to be there. Like if you just don't feel that drive or that itch, like you can't overjudge yourself. Like that's just how you feel. And you just got to be in tune with that and understand that, you need to find that next thing that's going to give you that itch. It's going to give you that drive and that inspiration to pursue it at the highest levels. Because whatever you're going to do, there's no use in doing it if you're not going to give it your all and try to be great at it.
Yeah, so let's also talk about how you can use the mental skills that you've learned in sport, outside of sport, to gain a competitive edge in whatever area of work that you're doing. I mean, are there certain skills that you learned while playing basketball that you can look back and say, this has been really helpful in the rest of my life?
The biggest thing and I think I just kind of realized this recently, is the ability to fail, and to face adversity and to continue going in spite of it. That within itself, I think, deters so many people from chasing the things that they feel like they want to do, is that they're afraid to fail. And and in sports, like, you're constantly failing. Like, you're messing up plays, you're losing games, you're running into roadblocks, you're having bad practices. Like, that is as much a part of the process as anything else. And it reminds me of the Michael Jordan quote where he's like, I've missed over 9,000 game winning shots, or some lost all these games, but that is the reason why I succeed. So you don't get to success without going through failure first. Like, that is a major part of the process that people try to avoid. They're afraid to step out there, to try something new, to put their ideas into the world, to pursue their dreams at the highest level, because they're afraid of it not working out. And you can't live like that, And so I think that ability to endure failure is something that I take with me every day. I actually look for it. I look to fail. If I'm starting something new, or I have an idea, or some type of business venture, or whatever the case may be, I'm hoping I mess it up, because I'm going to learn from that and I'm going to be better going forward. And so I think that is there's so many skills, but that to me is like right up there with the most important things that I've taken away from basketball.
This is going to be such a good episode. Because it's quotes like that that get me so excited to have people like you on my podcast, because you just bring such a different experience, like the last person I had on and the last person I had on. And everyone deals with sport and their playing days and then the days after that so differently.
Mm-hmm.
And like you were saying earlier, I mean, every sport is different, and every sport has a specific kind of timeline that you can kind of anticipate yourself staying in the sport for. But obviously things like injuries and unforeseen cuts from teams kind of switch that and leave you with potentially nothing, and
Right.
kind of spiraling like, who am I outside of sport? So let's just talk about Athletes Unheard and how outlets like that can help athletes through the process of leaving their sport and dealing with the mental struggles that may potentially come from that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Athletes Unheard kind of came to me mainly because I started to recognize some of the struggles that I had with mental health, and how it was something that I never paid attention to, probably not until I retired from basketball. I don't think mental health was a term I even heard until I was done playing. And so, looking in hindsight, not knowing how to deal with emotions growing up, having this athlete mindset of like, I can handle anything and get through anything on my own, and disassociating my feelings or my emotions and just being stoic. That is really what athletes are taught, is this mental toughness, this tunnel vision on just getting the job done. And I think that can be advantageous to your athletic career. But that's not how humans operate in the real world. Like, emotions play a part in life. And so understanding that about myself, and even experiencing like severe anxiety once I retired, and having to deal with that, and that being exacerbated due to like COVID, and then seeing like the amount of athletes who are also struggling with depression and anxiety and other struggles. I didn't really feel like personally that these conversations around mindset, mental health, mental wellness was being had at a high enough level. And I always think back to the quote of like 90% of sports is mental, 10% is physical, but majority of athletes spend all of their time on the physical aspect. So it's like, why are we not taking a more proactive approach to mental fitness, to mental health, to mental wellness, to ensuring that athletes are not only, in a mental capacity to perform at the highest levels on the playing field, but also off of it. And that's really the birth of Athletes Unheard. I wanted to have a place where athletes are having these conversations that, they can just be open and candid about their experiences, whether that's positive or negative with mental health, what they think about it. And furthermore, just become more educated about the topic, because I think a lot of the stigma is that, we don't understand certain terminologies and definitions of mental health. When people hear mental health, they cringe because they associate it with mental illness, and they're not the same. So it's debunking some of those words that we use around it, but also just giving athletes a place where you can share your story. You're not going to get criticized or judged, or you can be as transparent as you want. And we're here to build a community and to support you and to help you throughout your journey. Whether you are an athlete for the next 10 years of your life or you retire tomorrow, like, this is a place where athletes can come and just be open about mental health. And so we're very big on storytelling and just trying to create a community that's a catalyst for a movement that, frankly, I think should have happened years ago, but we're here now. And I'm very optimistic about where the mental, health and wellness space is moving as it pertains to just sports in general.
So on your website, you had two statistics. One was that professional athletes, 35% of them are struggling through some kind of mental health crisis, whether that is performance anxiety or depression. And then furthermore, 10% of college athletes that are struggling with some kind of mental health issues don't seek help. Or only 10% do seek help. So what does that say about the current culture of seeking out those resources? And what can we do better? How can we do better?
Honestly, I think it's higher than that. But I got those statistics from an organization called Athletes on Hope, which is kind of like a partner organization to us. We've done some work with them, and they're huge on supporting athletes from multiple different aspects. But I think when it comes to athletes being able to be open and to talk about the things that they're going through, it starts with the people at the top, the people who are around athletes, the administration, the coaches, the parents, and their understanding of mental health and how your mindset plays a huge part in how successful that you're going to be in or out of sports. The more that we educate those people who are in direct contact with athletes on a daily basis, the more that they are capable to provide support and to understand the triggers, to understand what it looks like when an athlete might be struggling or dealing with something internally. Because another challenging aspect of mental health is that you can't see it. And I think that's really the challenging part with physical injuries. Like, a coach can see, like, oh, you have, an ankle injury or your knee is hurt and we're going to sit you out. We're going to, you're going to take some time off and go to rehab. Whereas, with anxiety attack or some type of performance issue that you can't really see with an athlete, it's hard for a coach to understand that because they can't really, it's not tangible. And that's the challenge that we have to kind of overcome, is getting people who aren't really, don't really understand mental health, don't really, understand how it, affects an athlete's ability to perform, more education around, some of the triggers, some of the things that could be affecting any given athlete, and then addressing it accordingly and providing, such as we're doing, and open doors for athletes to just talk and be candid. Because I think the more that you build that trust and rapport with someone, the more they're going to feel open or comfortable talking to you. And so it has to be about transparency and trust, and for all of us to understand that mental health is real and it matters in and out of sports for these athletes.
So how do you feel about, I kind of know the answer to this based on what you've said so far in this interview, but how do you feel about sports psychologists being in professional leagues and team associated?
I'm definitely in favor of it. I think that, recently we've seen more mental health professionals being employed by, professional teams. And even from a union standpoint, I think the NBPA, named Dr. William Parham, I think his name is, the director of health and wellness for the union. And I think that's huge when it comes to understanding that, even at the professional levels, you have athletes who are going through it, who have, certain challenges from a mental perspective that they're facing, and that they're taking this seriously enough to provide more support, and being proactive about, how can we further help these athletes, to make sure that they're in a good headspace to do their jobs and to balance everything that comes with being an athlete. So, as I said before, like when you look at some of the moves that are being made around these teams and these organizations and these unions and these leagues, like we're definitely making some headway as far as, how we view mental health, what steps needs to be taken in terms of just making sure that these athletes are getting what they need to perform. And so I'm extremely, inspired and encouraged to continue doing what I'm doing, because I see the impact that it's making, and how it's trickling down from the best leagues in the world, the best teams in the world, and even more how these athletes are speaking out. I give a lot of credit to DeMar DeRozan and Kevin Love and Liz Cambage and the numerous athletes that I haven't named. They're using their platforms, their voices to speak out, and to talk about their struggles. I think that's inspiring and encouraging other athletes to do the same, and really helping our cause. So I'm in favor of it, and can't wait to see what this landscape will look like in the next several years to come.
So how do you think that coaches should deal with athletes who come to them and say, I need to take a mental health break? I am either burnt out or I'm really seriously struggling and I need to seek additional help and I need to take a break from sport because of this to deal with what's happening in here. How do you think that coaching staffs and front offices should deal with those athletes coming and saying, I need help and I'm going to seek it outside of the realm of this sport?
Well, first and foremost, I think they need to take it very seriously and understand that, even though you might not understand it, or you don't really know if this athlete is telling the truth or they're blowing smoke, like you need to take it seriously and understand that, they may need some help, and do what you can in your position to provide that, whether that's finding a therapist or a sports psychologist, and just helping them through that journey. Not you necessarily having to be the one to solve the problem for them or try to fix it, but doing what you can to just support them as a person, getting back to the humanity side of athletics and understand that these are people before they're athletes. So I think once you can empathize with that and understand that I may not know where this person is coming from, but if they're struggling, I just need to be, someone that's helping them get through whatever they're getting through. And whatever they need me to do right now, I need to do that. I need to help them. And I think that's what every coach needs to understand and to the step to take. And I know there's a lot of old school coaches that, they they don't really understand it, and they might not ever get it. But to me, it just goes back to just understanding that these are people. These are people before the athletes, and putting that as the priority.
So say you have you have an athlete who's going through this and they approach a coach who is like the latter that you just mentioned and does not prioritize mental health resources, does not provide his or her team with adequate areas to explore their mental health outside of the sport. How do you as the athlete say, I know that we're not on the same path, we're not on the same level in our understanding of mental health, but I need to do this and you need to support me in this?
It's very challenging. I had an old school coach in college, and he was stuck in his ways. He believed what he believed, and there was very little anyone could say to change his mind about what he felt was right. And so, I think for me personally, it's really important for these athletes to have someone else in their support system, someone else around them who they can talk to, who you can trust, who can help you kind of guide you through that situation, or that relationship dynamic with the coach, whether that's a parent or your high school coach or a family friend, or one of your personal friends. Just having like a sounding board or someone who you could work through that problem with, I think is very important, to kind of do when it comes to that. Cause like I said, it's just very difficult when you have old school coaches who are stuck in their ways and they've been doing it one way for so long and nothing is going to change their mind. So it's hard. But having that person in your corner who you can, talk to, or at least try to help you figure out what to do, I think is really crucial.
I agree. I think that hopefully coaching staffs will have someone like that implemented. It may not be the head coach. They may not be able to sympathize with that kind of mindset, but maybe it's an assistant coach, or maybe it's a strength and conditioning coach who also has a sports psych background. I mean, those kind of people can come in areas that you didn't expect them to come from.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you just need one person to talk to, and it may not be the person you expect it to be.
Right.
So let's talk about what's next for you. I mean, is Athletes Unheard something that you want to really transform into the rest of your life, or is there something else?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the foreseeable future, like Athletes Unheard, I think it's something I'm really passionate about. There's a lot of, purpose behind it. And it's something I think can make a huge difference in a lot of athletes' lives. So that's been my focus. It's what I want to grow. It's the brand that if it, meets the expectations or the vision that I have for it, I have high hopes for where I can take it. And so I'm really bullish on the whole mental health movement within sports. And I think Athletes Unheard can play a major part in that. So that's really, what I've head down been doing for the past several months, trying to grow day in and day out. And just hoping that I can make a difference in the world of sports and in a lot of athletes' lives. So.
And is there anything else that you wanted to talk about, wanted to clarify, wanted to kind of plug? I can include links to Athletes Unheard and also both of your books in the show notes. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention?
No, not particularly. I mean, probably we do have a text platform with Athletes Unheard. So you can, we provide mental fitness tips, daily inspiration. We're going to start doing some giveaways as well with our text platform. So I'm really huge on that as well, because I think it meets the athletes where they already are, which is on their phones. So all they have to do is send us a text to 202-918-3450. And we basically, just stay in direct communication if athletes have any questions or, just want feedback for something that they're going through. Not that we try to replace being a therapist or anything of that nature, but just being an additional, sounding board or support to younger athletes. I think the text platform is going to be huge in that regard. So that's something I'm actively trying to build out day in and day out, and feel like it has a lot of potential going forward.
So do you have people currently texting that number?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And what kind of services are they looking for? I mean, is it more of like an inspirational quote platform, or is it more of a daily positivity text that's coming to them?
A little bit of all of that, and we also provide like mindset advice. So an athlete might be struggling with a certain dynamic of being an athlete. Maybe it's confidence, maybe it's been performance anxiety. So we try to provide like quick little tips or tactics that athletes can implement, no matter what sport they play, to help them kind of cope or deal with some of those challenges. And if they have further questions, they could text right back to us. So it's really more so just like seamlessly having that communication and creating more dialogue and engagement with our community.
That's a really cool way to reach your clients as well that I had never even heard thought of.
Yeah. I mean,
so are you running this entire platform? Is it just you, or do you have people working with you?
I've had several interns, and I give a lot of credit to them because there's no way I could do all this work on my own. And so, yeah, I've had interns from all over who have contributed, whether that's from, conducting interviews to establishing relationships with some of the athletes that we have in our community, managing, community management, things of that nature. So it's far from being just me, just a lot of people in the background who are just happy to help the cause and support the mission.
So where do you see this going? I mean, what's your end game? When will you look at this brand and say, this is exactly what I envisioned?
I don't think, honestly, I don't know if you ever get to that point. It's hard because when you feel like you're truly making a difference in something that matters to people, you just want to continue expanding on that impact. And so our vision is to really make mental health and physical health viewed as one and the same for athletes. Going back to that quote of like, athletes put all of their time into the physical aspect of sports. How can we encourage them to have more conversation and to take mental health, mental wellness, mental fitness as seriously as they do the physical side? That's the vision. That's what we're trying to accomplish. And there's hundreds of thousands of athletes in the world who have yet to understand this and that we want to touch and reach. And so won't stop until we get there. And that's I don't know if I'll ever get to a point where I'll say, this is it. We made it. It's a continuous daily grind. And, you're just trying to do all you can to change lives, really.
I think that is a great way to conclude the interview. I am out of questions, and if there's nothing else that you want to mention, then I think that we can close this off, and I can start editing this together. I think it's going to be a great episode.
Thank you, Julie. I really appreciate you having me.
So I think that this episode is coming out in 3 weeks. So
Okay.
I'll message you when it comes out, and there will be some social media. So if you could just send me like a nice picture of you to put in our socials, that would be great. You can just email it to the email that we've been corresponding with, thejulia@closermentality.com. And I'll talk to you soon. I hope you loved the episode.
That was great. Thank you. I appreciate it.
And I'm really excited about this. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Have a good day.
You too, Julie.
Bye.